The story of the Great Revolt did not start on Masada. It began in Jerusalem in the year 66 AD, when tensions between Jews and the Roman Empire intensified. This magnificent village of En-Gedi, an oasis in the western shore of the Dead Sea, was once a flourishing Jewish settlement. During the Roman and Byzantine periods, En-Gedi reached the peak of its prosperity as an imperial estate. The archaeological remains point to a large, thriving, and well-organized settlement which utilized every piece of land and drop of water for agriculture. The Jews here even produced a secret perfume which made a name for itself across the entire empire.
Gary, so what do we know of this ancient perfume that was produced in this area?
Well, the Persimmon Perfume was a very prestigious and extremely expensive perfume that was manufactured in Jericho and En-Gedi. It was literally worth its weight in gold, and the production process was a very, very closely guarded secret. It was highly regarded by the Romans because it gave a lot of money to the Roman coffers. It flowed a lot of money into the Roman coffers, and it was owned, this entire area was owned at one time by Cleopatra after it was given to her as a gift by Mark Antony. Now, the people in En-Gedi made a lot of money from the persimmon industry, but they got into trouble, ironically enough, several times throughout their history with their fellow Jews during the time of the Great Rebellion and the Second Great Rebellion, which broke out in 132 AD. But none of this really interested the patrician women of Rome, who wanted their perfume, so they continued to get it.
But the glorious days of En-Gedi did not last long. The oasis in the middle of the desert was a strategic point back in King Herod's era, when he conquered Masada. The Great Revolt of the year 66 made this place a battle zone between two Jewish factions.
What is believed to have happened in this area during the Great Revolt of the Jews against the Roman Empire?
Well, in the beginning, not too much. They continued to work and make money with the Persimmon Perfume. However, a little farther on down the road, during the rebellion, there's a possibility that a terrible massacre took place here of the rebels against the Jewish citizens of En-Gedi, in which hundreds of people may have been killed.
The first-century Roman Jewish scholar and historian Josephus Flavius, or by his Jewish name, Yosef ben Matityahu, mentions En-Gedi in his book, The Wars of the Jews. He describes a scene which took place here. They came down by night without being discovered by those that could have prevented them, and overran a certain small city called En-Gedi. They prevented those citizens that could have stopped them before they could arm themselves and fight them. They also dispersed them and cast them out of the city. As for such as could not run away, being women and children, they slew of them above 700. Afterward, when they had carried everything out of their houses and had seized upon all the fruits that were in flourishing condition, they brought them into Masada.
Josephus was a conflicted personality, and it was a conflict that he never really managed to resolve. When you read his book, The Jewish War, you literally hear two voices coming at you at the same time. You hear Josephus, the Roman historian who has to write for his Roman audience and blacken the name of the Jewish rebels as often as he can, makes the Romans feel good about themselves. On the other hand, and often on the same page, you hear Joseph, the son of Matityahu, the proud Jew, who's very proud of a lot of the exploits that his countrymen managed to carry out against the Romans during the rebellion. So there was fighting here. There may have been killing, there may have been some murders committed, but a murder on the scale, a massacre on the scale that Josephus described, very, very unlikely. But one thing you really have to remember about the Great Rebellion is that during certain parts of it, it was as much a civil war as a war against the Romans. And unfortunately, there were times when Jews killing Jews was the rule rather than the exception.
The Sicarii was the only cult described by Josephus as a Jewish faction who fought the Roman Empire during the First Jewish-Roman War. Another cult that he describes is called the Essenes, a Jewish sect that lived in the time of the Second Temple. According to Josephus, the Essenes had different traditions, practices, and rituals from other Jewish sects. Some tend to associate the Essenes with early Christians. This, however, has never been confirmed.
Gary, what about the speculation of early Christians in Qumran?
Well, this has never been confirmed, but it's not outside of the realm of possibility. Some of the early writings of the Essenes bring to mind philosophies and ideas that were developed later on by the early Christians. Also, not too far from here, you have the Jordan River, a spot which is believed by many Christians to be the place where John the Baptist actually baptized Jesus. So it's not impossible that John himself did make it to Qumran at one time or another. Now, there are those who speculate that Jesus himself might have been here. He does disappear from the biblical narrative from age 12 to about age 31 or age 32. His 40 days temptation in the desert also took place very close to here, just a couple of miles north of the spot we're standing right now. So once again, it is possible that he made it to the settlement of Qumran as well, though we don't know for sure.
Here, in the Qumran cave on the slopes of the Judean Desert Mountains, one of the most important archaeological findings in the region was found.
Gary, what's the importance of the Dead Sea Scrolls?
Well, a lot of people consider the Dead Sea Scrolls the most important archaeological find of the 20th century, and it very possibly is. The beginning of the Dead Sea Scroll stories can fit very well into one of the Indiana Jones adventure movies, but what we have here was basically the remains of 900 scrolls found in 11 and now 12 caves, which comprise, among other things, the oldest copies of the books of the Bible ever found anywhere in the world. The first ones were written about 2,200 years ago, and you have all the books of the Bible there except for the book of Esther. Now, one of the other items which is very important about the Dead Sea Scrolls is the fact that it gives us an incredible window into the world of first century Judea. It enables us to understand how the people live, how they thought, and to understand a lot more about the sect of the Essenes, the Jewish breakaway sect who apparently lived here in the town of Qumran and are considered by most scholars to be the ones who wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls and hid them in the caves right behind me.
Tradition says that the Sicarii and Essenes were both involved in the Great Siege of Masada, the last rebel stronghold in Judea to fall into Roman hands. Recently, a 12th cave was discovered in Qumran with more artifacts from the Second Temple period. But many of the findings were lost or stolen, as mysteries remain open about identity, history, and religion in the 1st century AD.